Okay, if you'd like to view the live subtitles for this event, then please select the captions button. Not quite sure where that is, but apparently there's a captions button. And before we get started, I'll briefly cover the meeting etiquette. So all microphones are to be muted throughout unless someone is speaking. In the workshop sessions, please use the raise hand function when you wish to speak and wait to be called upon by the facilitator. So this is an open forum for free discussion, but please be respectful of others' views. Try not to talk over other people. Try not to labour points. You just have to make your point and it will be noted. And let's try and make sure everyone gets to have their say. And of course, please don't use any inappropriate language. For the Q&A session, please ask your question via the chat function, which will then be put to the panel on your behalf. If we're unable to answer all of the questions in the time available, we will certainly take them away and answer them afterwards. And we reserve the right to ask people to leave the event if they are disrupted or disrespectful of others, although I think we're all pretty much probably in agreement that our bus services are in a dire state and they're desperately needed. So Bath and North East Somerset Council is hosting this event for residents and businesses to help inform how bus travel can best be provided in the future, and it runs alongside the West of England Metro Mayor's Big Choices on Buses conversation, which is taking place throughout August, asking for your views and ideas on bus travel across the region. So bus services throughout the West of England face immense challenges, as we all know, particularly in the light of issues such as rising fuel costs and climate change. The government has announced last Friday that the COVID funding for bus companies, which was due to end in October, has now been extended until March of next year. However, the bus companies remain under pressure, and there may still be cuts on both subsidised and commercial routes as a result, particularly due to driver shortages, which means some of our services in Baines may still be affected. It's important to also stress that the West of England Combined Authority is now responsible for running our bus services and not the council. I think Nick shortly will be elaborating a bit more on that. I'm asked to say there's still time to complete our bus survey, which was emailed with your registration confirmation, and this will be fed into the wider West of England Metro Mayor's survey. So that's all from me. I will hand over to Nick Simmons, who is the Principal Engineer for Transport Policy at Bath and North East Somerset Council. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. My screen says Mark Hayward, and that's essentially because I've logged in to run this session on someone else's account. So I'm Nick Simons, and I'm the Principal Transport Planner here at Baines. So if I just share my screen, I can get our presentation underway. Hopefully everyone can see that. And I shall make it as big as I can. There we are. Yes, I wanted to give just a brief chat today just regarding bus services and how we've gotten essentially to where we are today. It's very brief. It's only going to be a 10-minute run through. But I wanted to start with bus deregulation. So buses were deregulated in 1986, quite some time ago, under the Transport Act of 1985. And this essentially means that buses are now run by private companies, companies such as Fairsaver and First. So they are actually running the bus services now. So essentially, the bus services and companies now actually decide which buses run, where and when. So they're in charge of the timetabling, and they run it as a business, as a commercial business to make money. However, the local authorities and WECA do have a role to play. And we can pay a bus company to run a service. We can subsidise a bus service if we feel that one is required for whatever reason. So if a bus company doesn't think that it would run one on a commercial basis, we can step in and actually fund a bus service. So following bus deregulation, local authorities lost a large amount of control. Before, they were actually run by city councils and councils across the country. But we now have lost that control. So we no longer run the routes or the frequencies or the quality of the network. We don't set the fares anymore. And we also don't, or haven't got the ability to cross-subsidise less popular routes. So we can't take the funding and the money from a popular route, a commercially viable route, and start funding ones which are less popular. So we haven't got that ability anymore. And local authorities do provide the infrastructure, such as the bus stops and shelters, the timetable displays, bus priority measures, and real-time information, the screens that you see in the bus stops, which tell you how long the bus is going to take until it gets to you. So essentially, as the bus funding gets cut that we receive as local authorities, it is becoming increasingly more difficult for local authorities to pay for those sort of extra socially required routes, so those ones that we deem are necessary, which the bus companies don't feel is commercially viable and which they won't run, essentially. So we then turn to sort of West of England Combined Authority, or WECA as it's termed. This was established in early 2017 through our region's devolution deal. We got one of the largest devolution deals in the country, which was fantastic. And it transferred a lot of the powers and funding to the region to improve transport planning skills and employment. So transport is one of those areas that WECA do have control over in terms of a lot of the funding, but obviously they work with us, the local authorities within the region, and we work together, and we will have an equal say in what happens in terms of transport. And we received £900 million of investment from central government. That's for a period of 30 years, and that's spread over those areas in terms of transport planning skills and employment. And WECA, under their role, has the following functions. They provide information on bus services. They administer the National Concessionary Travel Scheme, so the Diamond Card Scheme in Baines, and they also coordinate community transport. And as I said earlier, they also, along with the local authorities, invest in bus infrastructure, such as bus stops and so forth. So we also have the West of England Combined Authorities bus strategy. This is a regional bus strategy that was approved back in June 2020, just after lockdowns happened with COVID. And the vision there is, as you can see, is to provide bus services that people can depend on, are quick and reliable, combined to form a simple to understand and easy to use network, are accessible for everyone, safe and comfortable, and offer value for money to passengers and to the public purse. So there's a lot there in terms of the vision that they're wanting to achieve through that bus strategy. And one of the targets with that was to try and double bus passenger numbers by 2036. Obviously that was before COVID, so that challenge is now even greater to increase those numbers. And talking of COVID, the impacts of COVID, as we know, have been very far-reaching. But obviously at the start of lockdowns, we weren't quite sure how the disease was being transmitted. So people were being advised not to use buses, trains and trams unless absolutely necessary. And that did a lot of the good work in terms of getting the numbers of people we had on the buses to make it commercially viable. So numbers declined by 65 to 75%. And they still haven't yet fully recovered. Added to this, First and other bus companies are reporting quite a severe driver shortage. And that's primarily caused through a mixture of issues. Primarily, I think probably the worst is the move from bus drivers to lorry drivers and HGV drivers. And I think that was a huge shift away from First in terms of those jobs and the drivers. So that was a big issue. And obviously we've got Brexit as well as the cost of living crisis. We've also got fuel crisis increasing, of course, as well. And First are obviously looking at possible solutions, and that being obviously a pay review. An extra recruitment activity to try and increase those drivers that they have at the moment, but it is a big issue for them going forwards in the immediate future. I just wanted also to touch upon the bus service improvement plan and the future. So whilst the immediate future isn't looking too particularly rosy for public transport in terms of the driver shortages and the demands and commercial viability of the services, the longer term future, I think, is looking a lot more rosy because we have been granted an award of £105 million from central government to help us improve bus services across the region. And WECA and the local authorities have developed the bus service improvement plan, which delivers or plans to deliver a phased increase in in investment for bus provision, and they're going to do this through a number of delivery plans covering these next sort of 10 areas, which includes, most importantly, lower fares, more bus priority, more intensive services on those corridors, and better integration with other modes, as well as ticketing, more modern buses, and allowing bus passengers to have more of a say as well, which is very important. So, as I said, the future looks a lot more rosy with that funding available. And as part of that, there is going to be an enhanced partnership, which WECA are working with now with the bus operators to deliver those improvements. And as I said, that should really help us drive forward demand and a proper viable bus service going forward. But the immediate future is less rosy. So that's it from myself. I shall stop sharing. I hope that's okay. And pass back to you, if that's okay. Is that Mark I'm passing across to? I'll pass across to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick, or now Mark, as we might need to call you. Thank you, Nick. That's really good background on that. So part of the what we're undertaking now, it was WECA are undertaking this consultation, which they've been undertaking themselves, but part of that is focusing it on Baines. So what we've done as part of this consultation is sort of do a slightly Baines biased version of this to focus some of the issues into what we particularly need here. We've started that process, and I'll tell you the results as they are at the moment. And what we'll do is let me just get me presentation going. This consultation has not been going that long, and this particular consultation that I'm going to talk about is the one that we're doing at the moment for this event. And what we will do is we will be feeding what comes from this event and this consultation into the main WECA consultation itself. It was easier for us to sort of focus on the way that we were doing it within Baines and Baines's issues specifically. So what we've done is, if you haven't completed the online survey, the information that was emailed with your registration confirmation, please do that. We can see already that a lot of you had done that. In fact, the majority had already done that, and I will report as of this morning what the responses were. And I know, I had a quick look through, and I think since this morning when I was doing these graphs, when we had 57 responses, I think we've nearly doubled that. So I've had a quick look through it just to see if the kind of results we're getting is reflected in the ongoing answers, and they do seem to be. So that's quite good. But as many answers as we can get from the people of Bath and North East Somerset, the better, really, because we can pass those on, and from this event as well. So these are just the 57 responses we've had that start to give us an idea of what people are saying, having through the attendees of this event, and with this will carry on until the 31st, when we actually have to send the results into WECA. So let's just go quickly through who was answering. Well, it's fairly even, female and male. I noticed that on the answers that have come in since I did this an hour ago, it's slightly more swinging slightly towards the female side, but it's fairly even from those points of view. Ages wise, I think it's quite interesting, but I think not unsurprising, that we have sort of your 18 to 24 cohort is quite high, and then the people answering the survey as well at the other end. Interestingly, actually, in the last hour, that sort of middle set of groups has started to fill in. So I think we're looking at good numbers across the board, which is good from that point of view. We did ask people if they were disabled. One of the issues for us is to ensure that we're asking people who are able-bodied, disabled, whatever, all of those groupings, the right questions. So just over 20% of the people who answered said that they considered themselves to be disabled. So that's good, and I think that reflects in numbers that we should be seeing. Ethnic groups, again, the white, English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish, British selection, again, just looking through those, about 80%, and then there's a distribution either through other white backgrounds or what have you. Again, it's one of those issues that we as we go on and do consultation, we need to focus on making sure that we're actually reaching out to people who are not in those ethnic groups who may not answer this sort of questionnaire. The respondents, I didn't include in that the one from Chelmsford, which I'm not big on what the places are in Baines, but I don't think Chelmsford is. So I left them off the map, but there was one which was interesting. But again, we've got a reasonable distribution here. It'd be nice with obviously the urban centre is where most people will answer from, but equally it would be good to get good solid answers from the rural areas as well. But there are a number of forums and other things going on. There is one on the 31st, which we can put information out about as well, going on, which WECA are running themselves. Now we start to get to the nitty-gritty of what the people were telling us that were answering the survey, the people that we've had so far. I think we can say generally it was regular bus users. What we were trying to not have so much of was people who were speaking for other people who don't actually use the buses. But I think the sort of 70% of people who were answering this are what we would deem to be regular bus users. From that, not that the other people don't have anything to say about that, they might be future bus users, so that's good news. I think this is a really interesting question, asking, do you feel the fare you pay is reasonable for the service that you receive? I don't know what I was expecting from the answer to this, and I'm not sure Nick did either, but it was one of those ones where you kind of wondered. But I don't think that's an unreasonable and maybe slightly surprising answer. I think people seem to think if they're getting a good service, they're willing to pay what they're paying at the moment from that. But equally, people also had things to say, and a big number of people were going, well, I'm not really sure, because what do I get? What's the quality of service for what I pay for? So for those, we did a follow-on question, as you know. So for anybody who did answer no or not sure, how much did they feel would be reasonable? Strangely, I would pay more. Didn't actually get any responses from that particular one, but it kind of went up to 20% less. I think a lot of people thought, so a quarter of if it was a quarter less. It's one of those inadvertent loaded questions. You know, would you like to pay less for things? Is one of those ones, but it's an interesting question actually. There's a number of detailed answers within that, which we have those detailed answers. I haven't got time today to go through them, but they are actually quite interesting about the service people receive, and that they're aware of what value for money is. So I think that's very good. This one, we have to just take a moment to look at this because it's a relatively complicated diagram. What we're trying to do here in thinking about future bus use is indicating where the importance of future bus use is. So there's a number of things that were set up and discussed by the WECA survey, and we've sort of just refined the way of asking it slightly. So what we've said is, of all the things, which would you say was was the most important? If you think of very important things, and the biggest scorer wasn't price, it was actually reliability. And actually, strangely, people were quite fairly ambivalent about comfort. It's not to say it wasn't important. What it was saying is that, given choices, where would that lie? So the reliability and the frequency, as I look at this graph, are the standout ones on this, where you sort of go reliability, frequency of the bus service to be able to serve people. Less at the other end of that, access to cycle parking at bus stops didn't really feature. Interestingly, when I have just been looking at the ones that have just been coming in, which it starts to increase the numbers, that the cycle one is slightly changing into a sort of more, there's slightly more importance being put on that, but it's not up to the sort of reliability end of the scale. So that will be quite interesting when we finally get all the figures. Actually, are these the sorts of the figures that we're going to be looking at? Is reliability really the one to focus on, and the frequency? And we will see. But it's just interesting to note at the moment that this is the way that that people are answering about what's important to them. What we have here does the need to change buses to reach your destination put you off taking buses? Basically, does it put you off? And actually, a big chunk of people actually said that it really did. So the more you're having to change and the difficulty, and some of the comments were about the length of the wait or the reliability of the linking bus and all of those sorts of things. So again, it's really interesting in looking deeper into what people were saying off the back of these comments. So why was it putting people off? And it's not always just because they had to change. It was because of the reliability of doing that. So some interesting things that we'll have to dig down on when we pass that information on. Again, an interesting question. In general, how far in minutes are you willing to walk to get to a bus stop? And it's sort of, I think people are kind of okay up to 10 minutes, and then there's a complete drop off after anything over 10 minutes. All of a sudden it's like, that's a long way, but that's quite a walk. And I think fair enough. It sort of kind of drops off the cliff after 10 minutes, which I think is an interesting piece there. For some of you using if you're using your phone to do this one, is an interesting one. There was a slider bar which was offsetting one alternative with another alternative. So it was saying, when we're looking at evening and daytime services, it's not a question of just putting one on as well as the other. It's, if you're trying to put extra services on at one end, you have to detract from the other end. We had extremes on both views in the end. I mean, the present state, we put as a sort of central score. But for those, some people said, well, fewer daytime services to fund more evening services. People had big, strong views on that. But almost an equal number of people said for more daytime services, for fewer evening services. And what that did was it just averaged it out. You ended up kind of in the middle. So again, it'll be interesting to see if that changes. At the moment, as I say, I had a quick look on the little swing bar, and it hasn't really changed very much, even with a lot more answers coming in. So we will see on that one. Then we've got an interesting one. Sorry, I'm blocking myself here, but it's the frequency versus reliability. That says on the right. Again, slightly towards reliability, but it's still kind of in the middle there. People, again, had extreme opinions at both ends of that. But on average, it kind of is sort of still in the middle, but swinging slightly towards, can we have reliable buses? And people certainly, through the comments I have seen, people certainly did have quite strong views on the reliability. And I think if you've missed buses or they're just not turned up, fair enough. This one, we were talking about particular groups who receive discounts for this. And so the list is at the top there about OAPs and students and young people and large groups and disabled people and job seekers, that says. And should these continue to receive discounts as they presently do? And the majority of people just said yes, they really should. There were some exceptions to individual groups. Discount should be more. A few said discount should be less, but I think other people, there was just the 10% just saying, don't really know. It's a complicated scene. But I think on the whole, people were positive about that. And again, we'll see when the figures carry on. If you ever wanted something that was going to hit straight in the middle of one of these bars, it's this one. About WECA, we're talking about, in focusing resources in the future, do you encourage new bus users or do you prioritize existing users? And again, people had extreme views on both sides, but by the time you've averaged it out, it was dead in the middle. And again, having a look at even the extra ones that have come in, it still seems to be kind of dead in the middle of that as well. And are you support of increased ticket prices in order to travel on a environmentally friendly, on a more environmentally friendly bus, that says? And on the whole, people, again, based on this little sample of 57 people, they basically said no. It's, you know, they kind of should be, I suppose, is some of the answers. They should be environmentally sensitive anyway. So people weren't supportive of that. Although having said that, there was a lot of people going, I don't know really. Maybe it's complicated, isn't it? So I mean, so what I've done there is I've had a very quick run through. As I say, we've got answers coming in all the time. So in a way, it's trying to just keep up with those. But I thought it would be quite nice just to sort of tell you where we're going with what people are saying at the moment on the whole. As I say, we've already doubled the figures that I was just showing you within a couple of hours. but hopefully we'll have lots and lots of answers and detail that we can forward on to WECA to let them know what we feel in this area. Okay, so that was again a bit like Nick. It was a bit of a rush through just where we are at the moment, but again, it's just a potting look at that. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some workshops where we're going to talk to you about. There are 3 questions that are actually drawn from that because they're just really interesting questions about. We'd like to know a little bit more. So we should be able to put those up in a minute. So what I will do, there you go. Or we could do it now. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. These are the questions that we're going to be asking in our little groups. People will be randomly put into groups with a number of us who will be running the smaller groups, because obviously we've got a lot of people online, so we can't deal with everybody at once. So we're going to separate into all of those groups, which I think Sharon is organising for us as we speak. Our questions to you, which again, as I say, reflective of some of the questions the answers that have been coming back. First question is, what measures could be taken to encourage more people to use the bus rather than the car? Some of the types of things we kind of mean is things like cheaper fares, frequent services, decreased journey times, quicker routes, or improved reliability. The second question is, if you had to prioritise, and again, that was that one that hit straight in the middle because people had extreme views. Would you prefer more daytime and less evening services, or more evening and less daytime services? Because there's a kind of payoff that's needed in that. And what innovative or creative solutions can you suggest for our future bus services? There's the 3 questions. They will follow us into our little breakout rooms with everybody. And as I'm just reiterating what Councillor McCabe was talking about, what we really need to make sure is that we're respectful of what the other people have views, and other people have probably the opposite views than other people have. So we will try and respect that. We're going to do about 15 minutes on each question, just to set the rule for everybody. And I think I've said everything, Sharon, so can press the button. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope everybody's had a good time. In where they have certainly my group. I've got pages of notes, and so what we're going to ask everybody to do, if we would, is for the facilitators to feedback, yes, in 1 minute, what they had. I don't know who group 1 were. I can't remember what the numbers were. Was that me?
No, I was 1.
Well, you won. Do you want to have a crack at that, Matt?
Yes, 2 sides of notes. I don't quite know how to do it in a minute. So I'll just pick on a couple of things that we picked up on at the end. Really, we had a good spread of city and rural, but it's a family ticket. So on more ways to encourage people, obviously, if you can get youngsters using a bus at a really early age, a family ticket came up a number of times. So when you've got 2 or 3 or 4 kids, if you're bringing some friends' kids, being able to have 1 adult and a load of kids on 1 ticket, sort of a day pass for the family that's affordable, is going to be we think a huge plus. There was a big call for actually for better information, so demographics and users and potential use, and then starting when you make your decisions, you're starting from a point of knowledge. Big call for a long-term strategy that one can actually rely on, and an interesting point that if you're even a rural community of a certain population, i.e. if you're a population of a certain size, you get a guarantee of a certain level of service. So if you're a small rural community, okay, you get a guarantee of 2 bus services in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, something like that, something that we can all see and all agree on. And if there was one more point, I think the park and rides, if the park and rides actually didn't just link into a city centre, but linked between, say, Bristol and Bath, then the Chew Valley, who don't have who don't have a connection to Bath can actually have a service into the, say, Brislington Park and Ride, which has a fast service that links to, say, the Newbridge Park and Ride. And you know, even though there's changes, you can actually get in to Bristol and Bath from a rural community, which would be amazing. How's that for a minute?
That was, I reckon that was dead on a minute, Matt. That was who wants to go? I don't know. I don't know if we numbered our groups. I think we maybe should have done. Do you want me to go next? Just on the basis that while so our we had loads and loads of stuff to talk about. So in a way, I will pick it. None was necessarily more important than other ones. So on the what measures could be taken to encourage more people to use the bus rather than the car? Just to pick up on the point that Matt was making about the park and ride, that was brought up a lot in our group as well as to how that could be sorted out. We talked a bit about park and ride hubs and cycle and ride and all of those sorts of things. So there's quite a lot to go back as far as a set of suggestions. Our second question, which was our more difficult one, is if you had to prioritize, would you prefer more daytime and less evening services, or more evening and less daytime services? We did find this impossible to answer, because actually if you've not really got the services on either end of that, you're just robbing something that's already been robbed, so to speak. So it kind of fell into a, well, this is a fairly impossible situation to be able to do that. I mean, reliability was brought up quite a lot. I'm sorry, you've just done that, Matt. That was good. And actually just mixing in various other services, so that was good. We got loads of points on that. And on the third question about innovative or creative, we were kind of talking about that all the way through, but specifically a thing that came up a number of times was about demand responsive services, as much as they can be taken on, as much as that can happen. And the demand responsive and the link to kind of we sort of ended on a bit of a sort of link into taxi services, but how difficult that could possibly be in trying to do that, and it's probably a good place to get stuck on. But but it was also one of the things when we talked a lot about cost. Actually, the issue of well-being is actually the thing in the end that what this is about, as much as it is about the cost. So it's that kind of trying to make that that point. So yeah, lots and lots of really good things. We can report those, and I will pass on to whichever of my colleagues puts their hands up willingly. Nick.
Joe.
Oh no, I got it wrong.
Do you want me to go next, Mark?
Yeah, go on, Pam.
Okay. Well, firstly, as everyone else has said, you know, huge thanks to the participants. We had a really wide-ranging and incredibly thoughtful discussion. So thank you very much to all of those who participated in that. I'm not going to do it justice, but please be assured that for this and all other groups, we're going to have the information pulled across, and it will all feed in. So if it's not mentioned specifically now, please don't worry. So first question, reliability was absolutely critical. On time, every time. We need to instill that in our bus network. Bus operators need to identify new markets, and rural communities are going to be key to that. And we need to look at the allocation of road space, prioritising the movement of people over vehicles, and that will enable us to make space for an improved bus service. Question 2, this idea of prioritising different types of services. We recognise that was a really complex question and perhaps misses the point of what we need. And I think it was Lynn who said very eloquently that we need more and better. We need more services and better services rather than prioritising between the two. And the other aspect that came up was around school transport, and that being a really critical way in which we can not only shift school children more sustainably, but also the people who are perhaps driving them to school, which will have a kind of double benefit. The final question, question 3, we stressed the importance of multimodal, multi-operator tickets, the need to embed, which Anne raised actually, embed and develop a core route network, which is identified by the the councils as the authorities as opposed to the operators, and that will form the backbone of all of our services. And then looking at ways in which, for example, DDRT, so dynamic demand responsive services, particularly for our rural communities, could feed into that spine of services to combine to create an effective public transport network. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant. So I dare say Nick again, but if somebody else, is he not going to go? He's just not going to do it.
I'm happy to jump in. Lucy and I ran the sort of last breakout room, and I'm happy to summarise what we discussed on that one. So with regards to question 1, in terms of what we can do to sort of drive up that sort of passenger demand, we had certainty of journey timings. So we need to be certain that those links are there. So when and it's not just those journey timings between buses, but also the other modes. So when we turn up at the bus station in Bath, we've got to have absolute certainty that that train is actually on time from Bath Spa and running as it should do. So it's having that certainty and that integration and treating it as a system that's a genuine transport system. But also we need to start thinking about people's journey needs a lot more. At the moment, obviously we provide the services that we do, but we need to start thinking, well, what are people travelling for? What purposes? Access to surgeries and hospitals and so forth. And then the question also came up about how the buses run at the moment. Is it best to have point to point, or is it better to make those more flexible? We also then talked about RUH links, again with the hospital links, and whether that should be a sort of a secondary hub. On question 2, and as Pam said, I'm probably not doing services, but I have noted I've got 4 pages of notes here with me, so it will all be taken account of. In terms of question 2, we started, there was an interesting idea about the idea, and again, there's nighttime, daytime services, but one of the ideas that came out was whether there'd be any interest in the sort of central business district, whether they'd be interested in actually help subsidise those bus services for evening uses to help the nighttime economy. And whether they'd be interested in actually putting their hand in pocket and actually trying to, so people aren't then running away from Bath at 10:30 to try and catch the last bus home. They can actually stay out until later because there is a nighttime bus that runs at 2 o'clock in the morning or what have you. Another important point is daytime use for children and school children. I think that was picked up earlier. One really interesting point which came through was the students at Bath University and the need for different types of services at different days and a different emphasis at different times of day. So during the daytime, students want more services, more frequent services, but actually during the nighttime, students want more reliability. So they're not stuck on that bus stop at 1 o'clock in the morning, completely exposed, just waiting for a bus to come that's a quarter of an hour late. So they want more reliability. So there's those points. I said there's an awful lot more, but those were the ones I've highlighted just quickly. Just with the last question with regards to innovation, road user charging is felt to be required to help drive up, well, certainly to change the relative merits essentially between public transport use and car use to drive up numbers using public transport. Branding is incredibly useful and important in terms of livery on those buses and making them really distinctive. We need to embrace technology, much more on-demand services, almost Uber services on the smaller routes, with the larger buses then being maintained on the core routes in and out, and much heavier reliance on community transport. And there's some good examples there. And the last one was just free public transport, or certainly much reduced public transport fares, as they have done in Luxembourg, making those free to anyone who wants to jump on a bus. But yeah, really, really useful feedback. So thank you everyone for that.
That's brilliant. Have I missed anybody? Have I missed any groups? Does anybody? I think I did everyone, didn't I? Right. That's very good. Okay. So what we have, whilst we have a number of professional people who know their stuff, there's an opportunity for some Q&A, so the questions and answers. So we've got probably about another half an hour to go. So if people can, I'll have to take it off the chat. So if people will ask the questions, if they put a question mark at the end of it, it seems obvious, but it means I can pick it out because there's quite a lot of chat going on there at the moment. That would be really good. So obviously people need to do that. And I need also a second to read them as well. So nobody's asked the question yet, but the last person said, bus stop interchanges facilities all need to be transferred to the West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority, like West Midlands, Greater Manchester and Liverpool City region. Blimey, that was a starter without a question. So bus stop interchange facilities, did we want to start there? And who wants that one, Nick? Or anybody?
I'm happy to jump in as a starter for 10. It's not really my specialist area, but certainly, as I said, we at the moment, our local authorities do fund and pay for a lot of those that infrastructure in terms of bus stops and waiting areas. And obviously, we'll always be looking to try and provide as good a bus service and bus stops as we possibly can. And it is about making sure that information is as easily read and understood by everyone who wants to catch a bus, and that's the key point that we need to try and make sure. So those connections and those bus services run on time, but also that it's easy to understand. And I think that, again, it comes back to embracing technology and having the apps on people's phones, so we can actually start providing more mobility as a service, as it's called, so linking those various different modes and actually start providing the information, because I think that's going to be absolutely key. So it's not just the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, but it's the digital infrastructure as well that I think we need to really start focusing on. I'm sure Lucy will probably, if she's there, will probably have a lot more to say on infrastructure than myself.
I'd rather not go into this issue on that at the moment, if that's okay, Nick. It's a bit complex regarding transferring of ownership of bus stops and so forth.
Right. The question that I think just came through that's really interesting is about the Equalities Act. How does the Equalities Act affect decisions of bus axing? Very specifically, e.g. the 42 from Odd down Park and Ride to RUH. Thank you for that, Matt. Who wants to pick that one up?
I don't know if our equalities officer is still on the...
I am. I'm here. I'm just trying to put my video on.
Because you made a very interesting point about protected characteristics. Perhaps you could explain.
Yeah. So we talked about the R2 bus being used mostly by elderly people accessing the RUH, and I have to say my mum uses it. She's 82 this year and won't drive to the RUH, but will use that bus. When we are considering anything within the council, we have to look at the framework of the Equalities Act. That's a legal framework, and one of the protected characteristics is age. So we need to look at older people, younger people, all ages really, but who's using our buses, who it's relevant for, what impact it would make if we were to cancel the bus, because there could be a legal challenge. And that's something we have to be very aware of.
What does Baines think of percent powers to the Metro Mayor, Dan Norris, to fund public transport network for bus service improvements, train service, Metro West? I don't even understand the question. I hope somebody in the team does.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, good. Please tell me.
I think Sarah should answer.
Yes. So the question is about precepting powers, which is we discussed this in our group, but I don't know if the other groups did. So as I understand it, other Metro Mayors, apart from the West of England Combined Authority, so places like Greater Manchester and Birmingham, have what's called precepting powers. That means the power to raise taxes as a combined authority. So to have an actual add-on line onto the council tax bill in those areas, which they can use then to subsidise public transport in those areas. And for whatever reason, the West of England Combined Authority was designed in such a way that Dan Norris does not have those powers. So David Redgewell is asking whether we as a council would support him acquiring those powers. So when Dan has run these sessions through this summer of public engagement, he has made that question very central. He wants those powers and he is seeking support. So it's only recently come up, as far as I'm aware, this discussion in detail. So I've discussed with my colleague, Councillor Kevin Guy, who's the leader of the council, and certainly he and I are not opposed to Dan Norris having precepting powers, but it's not something that as a group of councillors we've had the opportunity to discuss much more widely. So I can't say formally whether Baines as a council is in favour of precepting powers. You know, to my mind, it would be a good thing if we had more public subsidy going into the bus service. And when Dan Norris has put forward the figures and said boldly, Greater Manchester puts in £60 per person per year, and Baines puts in £20, for example. The context that is left out of that discussion is that as things stand without precepting powers, so obviously if he had precepting powers, your council tax would go up. But without precepting powers, we at Baines don't have the ability to increase a council tax more than a certain amount. So if we were to increase from £20 per person to £60 per person per year, that would be £40 per person per year, taken off some other service that we currently provide, whether that is social services or, I don't know, you know, something to do with, well, anything else that we provide, libraries, for example. Yep, so we have to put it into that sort of context.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I will keep going with the, oh, it's blimey, there's one for me. I thought I was going to get away with none for me. Right, so it says 100 or 200 responses does not seem much of a sample on which to assess public attitude. How many responses do you hope for? Well, that's an interesting one, because this little subset sample that we're using here is actually just the Baines subset of the questions we'd like to ask Baines people as part of the bigger WECA consultation. So the question about how many they would like is probably a question for them. As far as getting into statistics, which I'm sure nobody wants to, but I'm going to go into it anyway, if we got to 200 responses, you start to find that the demographic that you're talking about and the type of answers starts to repeat itself. So as a person who does statistics, I would hope that we get to a couple of hundred, because I think it gives us a good taste for the type of attitude that people have. Having said that, we're not saying that this is the WECA consultation, because to go to full consultation, we would need to do it for 6 weeks, and we would need to do it under all the proper attitude. What we're trying to do is to get a view from this group and the wider group. So I think it's just, there's a context, to use Sarah's words there, there's a context to what we're doing here, which is part of a subset of a bigger and wider consultation. So how many do I hope for? I hope for many thousands, but it would probably be a couple of hundred is probably what we'll get. And I think given the amount of time and that we have to get this back to WECA by next week, I think we're doing okay as far as it goes. So that was mine. Does anybody else want to add to what I just said? I might be wrong. Nope. Next question, Sam Ross to everyone. Can the bus stop information be digitized for rural communities? It seems bizarre that areas with poor services don't have this service, whereas those with frequent services do. Ooh.
Thank you, Mark. I was going to say basically, yes, there are apps available out there. I use the Bus Checker app, which is very useful. But obviously, as you said, that's not necessarily what you were referring to wholly. It should be noted, yeah, the real-time passenger information is available in a lot of the bus stops on a lot of our rural networks. So again, I'm going to refer back to what I know, which is the A37. So along those routes, those bus stops do have that passenger real-time information, and it shows you the next bus and when that's going to be due, and the 2 buses after that. So it's out there and it is digital, but we need to make it better and we need to improve on it. And as I said, this whole idea of mobility as a service, whereby you start getting different modes and timetables, and actual journey planning starts to become a lot better when you have this holistic network and digitized form of transport, and you can actually start picking out options rather than just looking at buses and what times the buses are going to be. You can start looking at how that links into trains, how that links into other modes of transport, and how you can then plan your journey a lot better. And I think the digital platforms for actual journey planning are starting to get an awful lot better as well. So I think it's a positive story, and I think it's only going to improve as we move on. Sorry, Lucy, you've got your hand up. There's also Mark.
Right, I had unmuted. That's fine. Lucy, you had your hand up. Do you want to unmute, Lucy?
Sorry about that. I've had a conversation with the West of England Combined Authority about this very issue in the last couple of weeks, particularly to cover areas like the Summer, the Cam and the Chew Valley. And we're hoping to, where possible, see if we can get some more real-time information, which are those digital signs at bus stops that you may see in Summer Norton or in Bath, in some of the rural areas. But the main issue is obviously to get one of those signs up, you do need a 4G reception or Wi-Fi at the stop, which a lot of rural parts of Vanes currently don't have that. So that is, and WECA are aware of that, and we're going to see what we can do over the next year or so to try and get more information at rural bus stops.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That's really good. The next one is one from my own heart. This Bath and North East Somerset prioritising routes to ensure that they don't disappear. I hope there's a positive answer to this one from somebody. Who wants to have a crack? Sarah, you want to unmute?
Well, I'll have a go.
Sorry, that was me.
The issue we have, am I unmuted?
You're all right now, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we absolutely are putting across our priorities to the West of England Combined Authority and to First Bus, and our priorities are about ensuring all of our communities stay connected and that the most disadvantaged areas in particular retain their bus services, but that everywhere retains a frequent regular bus service. The problem is that we don't have the powers to make that a reality. So all we can do is put across our wishes and requirements and wait to see what the response is.
Yeah, can I add, certainly as a rural councillor, you bet we're arguing to try and keep the rural buses because First are constantly trying to cut them. So, you know, Marksbury, my ward has one bus and it only goes to Bristol. So if they were to cut it, that, you know, Marksbury would have no buses, and you think that's quite a major route. So yeah, we can't afford to lose our rural connectivity.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm cracking through them. Thank you, Lee, for this one, which is it's a long one, but it's a good one. Let's say passenger groups and local authorities come up with a great idea for, say, an easy to understand color-coded bus network, but the bus operators say no. Then is the idea dead, or do you feel that the new enhanced partnership arrangements give you any powers to introduce such ideas anyway? That's a cracker. Who wants that?
I guess, you know, that's the reason for today is seeking views from the community on what they want to see in terms of their buses, and us then putting that to WECA and working with the bus operators, and that's what the enhanced partnership is going to hopefully do with the bus service improvement plan. It's going to improve lines of communication between us, the authorities and bus operators to provide a much better service all round. And I would hope that as part of that obviously we can all listen to what people are wanting in terms of their bus services and feed that through WECA and the bus operators and deliver it together. That's what I would hope we would be able to do. So it's quite a specific question, but that's my own view on it, is that, you know, we need to work with WECA and the bus operators through that enhanced partnership to deliver these improved services. Oh, sorry, you're on Mark. Mute, Mark, sorry.
We were going through the text, but because Catherine has been waiting so long with her hand raised, I'm going to allow it. So what is it that you want, Catherine?
Just to say that, you know, why are we so tied with these contracts? Because they aren't set in stone. I mean, they are set in stone at the moment, but they were invented as part of the idea that we would improve our services when we had this competition, in inverted commas, between bus operators. But that's declined somewhat recently. I mean, naming no names, First Bus at the moment is not delivering a very good job at the bus station, and it stopped consulting its bus users group. You know, it is part of the payment structure, but it shouldn't be part of the decision-making structure. That should be up to the local authorities and to the national government, who should sit down together and work out where the money is going to come from, and then in terms, equal terms, how the benefits will outweigh that extra cost.
Thank you, Catherine. That's really good. I'm going to go to the next question, which is it's a cracker for the end of a session. Much of the council's journey to net zero plan is unachievable without any bus alternatives for cross-city traffic, school buses, new routes for park and rides to RUH, corridor improvement plans, Wiltshire Express from East, etc., etc. Is the council looking at how they can structure proposed cuts of current services to preserve JTNZ plans on net zero and the council's 2030 carbon neutrality target? Wow.
Can I jump in? It's because this is one of the things that came up in our group, was the fact that we seem to be managing bus services by lurching from crisis to crisis. We were approaching a cliff edge in March, and first warned us that the government funding was about to run out and they'd be axing all these services. And then at the last minute, the government steps in and says, we're gonna keep the funding going to November. And then now we're in the same boat again. The funding, we're at another cliff edge. First has basically planned a whole load of cuts, and then last Friday they announced that they'll keep the money going to next March. So we kind of lurch. So the whole council is geared to sort of working to sort of try and stop first from axing all the buses, and then the government steps in and says, "Oh, we'll keep a bit more money going." So it's very difficult to plan or actually strategize for the long term when we're just lurching from short-term crisis to short-term crisis.
Brilliant. I think Sarah wanted to add to something to that.
Well, yes, I mean, essentially the question is very similar to the previous one about what are we doing to, campaign to retain the services we want, and the answer is the same. But I suppose it's to add that, to bring politics in, other people have been leaving politics out, but to bring a bit of politics in, as a Lib Dem, I can't support the state of the national bus network outside of London at the moment. It seems to be on the point of collapse, and it should be absolutely central to everything. It's absolutely central to us as a nation and us as a local authority achieving our net zero goals, resolving many issues of public health. And I mean, Vera Hobhouse is campaigning hard, and we as a council are taking whatever opportunities we can to write letters and to make our views known. But I think that all of you, if you have a view about bus services and whether they're currently in a fit state for the position we are at as a country, as a planet, are they fit for the future? If you think that nationally they ought to be organised differently, you should make your voices heard.
Brilliant, thank you very much. The next, I've got two. I'm going to go two more questions due to the fact that the second one was a question that I had, and I don't normally get to ask a question, so it's really good. So the next question is: has the need for and demand for travel by different modes, including public transport from different communities across Baines and Wecker, been surveyed in recent years? It's an interesting, it's got a number of answers, I'm guessing, but anybody want to go with this? Nick?
Happy to chip in. Yeah, absolutely. So as part of our highway network, we do monitor regularly and continuously traffic levels across the authority, and we do that through a number of automatic counting machines that you'll see on the roadside. We obviously have access to bus ticket data and punctuality data from First and from Wecker. We also have data from things like the voice scooters as well, from usership and riders and where they're going. And we obviously have surveys that are regularly done for cycling and walking. Added to that, we've obviously got the national picture, which is the census, which is probably the biggest whole picture in terms of transport, because everyone has to complete it and give us views on how they travel. So we do have a wealth of data, and sometimes that can be a problem in itself. It's actually managing the large amount of data that we do have. So yes, we do have data on people's movements, and we do as a region have this is slightly boring, but I will try and go through it quickly. We do have a new regional transport model which we'll be setting up, which is hopefully going to be very illuminating and allow us to start modelling more in terms of the various different modes and tell us a bit more about, if we put in certain measures, what are the various impacts of those. So that's being worked on at the moment, which is an exciting step forward. But yes, absolutely, we do have a lot of data for travel movements across the authority.
What we'll do is we'll pick up the rest of the questions and we will make sure that they're answered in one way or another as much as we can. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been fab to talk to you all. I'm not exactly sure who I'm passing to, whether it's Councillor McCabe or Councillor Warren to close. Do we know?
Shall I? I'll say a quick word. I'll apologise that I wasn't here at the start of the call, but as you know, we had to fit it in at very short notice, and so it was done to suit those who were organising the nuts and bolts of it rather than me, and that's fine. And but thank you to everybody for joining and for sharing your views. And please, if you care about bus services, continue to be active in this space to campaign and to help us to campaign nationally, because we want the best bus services we can possibly have locally.
Yeah, so, and it was thank you for coming and having your say on such an important topic for all our communities, both rural and city communities. And just a reminder to also complete the Metro Mayor's Big Choices on Buses survey on the West of England Combined Authority website, and to promote 2 other local bus consultation events in Keynsham and Chew Valley. And the details for these will be displayed on the screen, and there they are. Marvellous. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoons.